Good afternoon and good evening if there are anybody from the other side of the pond or any other place in the world. Good morning. Welcome to Code PaLOusa. Welcome and thank you for joining us. This is one of my favorite conferences to go to. This is a fun year, so we all have to be home and we're missing out, hanging out with each other in person. As much as like our industry lets us do what we want to do remotely, it's just not fun not being around folks. But hopefully next year all of this will be behind us. So I hope all of you and your families, you're staying safe and you're staying productive. Mental health and everything else is also something we need to keep in mind as we go through this year. It's going to be a long year. So yeah, take care of yourself and be kind. So let's start. Let's talk about mobile dev and what can Visual Studio do. So my name is Sam Basu. I think I have seen some of you in person. Some of the names sound familiar. So hopefully you have seen me at past Code PaLOusas. I've been there for the last maybe 7 or 8 years. I've been there. Yeah, I love going down to Louisville. I live, actually, I have a slide coming up, and I'll talk about it. So anyways, my name is Sam Basu. That's my social handle if you need to get hold of me. So that's me on Twitter, GitHub, Skype, Twitch, you name it. And I'm a dev advocate at Progress Software, mostly focusing on the Telerik side of the family, all the .NET stuff. So since we are all remote, I make it a habit nowadays to bring out a map to talk about where we are from. So I live on a giant island that's sandwiched between the Atlantic and the Pacific. Actually, I live right up by one of the big lakes, Lake Erie. There's actually a place called Erie in Pennsylvania, Northwest Pennsylvania. We call it like a little chimney that kind of juts out in between Ohio and New York. If you're going like east to west, you can cross Pennsylvania in about half an hour. It's a small slice, but then it takes me like 7-8 hours to drive down to Philly, all in the same state. So it's a big state. So yeah, that's where I'm at. It's summertime. It's nice by the lake, but our winters get a little rough sometimes with the lake effect snow. All right, so let's talk about mobile. And let me see, I have an hour. So I might do maybe 20-25 minutes of slides. And then, I can show you demos all day. So I'll jump out and I'll show you some code. But let's talk about like why Visual Studio, but why mobile in the first place? And how do you build for mobile? And notice I'm not saying mobile apps because that doesn't always need to be the case. But it's just you're building for the mobile form factor. It's 2020, so you cannot just build for web and desktop. If you don't build for mobile, you're missing out on a big chunk of your audience. Sorry if the background is bothering anybody. It's just a green screen. I'm a streamer, and I'm too lazy to bring it down. I was streaming this morning, but if it gets too bright for anybody, please let me know, and I can tune out some of the lights. So when you talk about building for mobile, it's just complicated. It's like you have all these recipes to build a cake, but there's just no one fixed recipe. It really depends on what cake you're trying to bake. What's your audience? Who are you trying to feed? So all that good stuff. So here is my one slide, and we're going to probably spend like 2 minutes on this, on all the broad ways in which you can build for mobile today. Right, and then there are probably outliers here and there, but these are some of the broad ones that I can classify. And the good news is the tools have come a long way. The technology stacks have come a long way. So no matter really what you pick, you'll be fine. The tools are great. Visual Studio helps you out in every way, be it on a Mac. I'm on a Mac today, and I'll show you some Windows stuff as well. No matter what you pick, it's just generic standard tech that you're writing, and you should be fine. So let's kind of dive into this for just a little bit. If you're building a mobile, or if you're building a website today, there is no reason why it cannot work nicely on a mobile device. So mobile web is sort of the lowest hanging fruit. There are lots of frameworks that help you out in making things touch-friendly. So things work. There is Angular, all of the SPA frameworks, Vue, Bootstrap is great. You can do Blazor, which we'll talk about. You can do Kendo UI, which is an open source framework we make. well, not entirely open source, but some of it. And then you can make mobile webs really sharp and good citizens on mobile form factors by doing something called progressive web apps. So we'll talk about this a little bit more, but these are really good mobile websites that show some of the strengths of having a web that is modern. So your caching, your how you load up your app, everything is can be well taken care of. So you can do all of that using mobile web, but you're still using the web as your distribution medium, so that may not be for everybody. You can obviously do native, but as we all know, it's expensive. These are three very different platforms we're talking about, so it's difficult for one person to know them all. It's difficult for enterprises to maintain like 3 different code bases that do one app, right? So we are always looking forward to like cross-platform solutions now. So when you talk about the hybrid layer, this is something that was interesting. In fact, last week or maybe 2 weeks back, this is Apache Cordova. This was something popular back in like 2010 when it first came out, and it's essentially building a mobile website with CSS and HTML and JavaScript and packaging it up and putting it in the app stores, and you get access to the device things like cameras and accelerometers and all that stuff through plugins. Ionic used to make wonderful tools, and Cordova was fine until Adobe finally killed it, because it honestly does not make a lot of sense. It does probably if you're building like simple why-not business apps, but it is very much running inside of a web shell, so you don't get like top-notch performance. If you're concerned about down to a millisecond performance, then hybrid is not your way. Probably for simple apps, you're going to be fine if the user doesn't notice and if you do a good job. But if you are using web stuff, then why not build native apps anyways, cross-platform apps? And this is where the story really has evolved quite a bit in the last few years. We call this JavaScript native. So NativeScript is an open source framework, React Native. And again, this comes down to how you're building your other web applications, and you can share some code. So you can do that. And then the cross-compile story, this is where you're writing higher level languages like C# and F#. And you're compiling them down into native bits on iOS, Android, and other mobile devices. So Xamarin comes to mind, Uno comes to mind, Flutter comes to mind. And again, all of these things you can do very comfortably from Visual Studio. So that's my like 2-minute spiel on all things mobile. Notice how in this stack, there is kind of a divide. Like, what do you want to do? Do you want to stick to .NET, or do you want to write JavaScript, right? Based on that, your decisions and your tools and what you want to build really changes. So folks in the chat room, let me know if you can still hear me, see me clear, and I can adjust as need be. So let's talk about .NET first, and we'll talk probably 10 minutes on .NET, and then we'll talk 10 minutes on JavaScript. So .NET is evolving, as we know. This is .NET as it stands today. This purple thing is what we have been using for the last 17 years. That's still there, going to be there for a long time. And this .NET Core is new, it's lean, it's cross-platform, it's modular. It runs ASP.NET, runs on the cloud, runs every outside of Windows. And then Xamarin was an acquisition from Microsoft. Yeah, thanks, Blake. So this was running on Mono, which is a port of .NET outside of Windows. And Mono is about 15 years old, very rich ecosystem, big API canvas, lets you do just about everything you do in .NET outside of Windows. But then now it's all one big happy family, and Xamarin runs on Mono, but that's slightly evolving a little bit at the end of this year. And the tools of our trade obviously have come a long way. It's not just Visual Studio on Windows. I use VS for Mac all the time. I use VS Code, and it still crashes probably a couple of times a week, but that's acceptable, I suppose. So again, it's a nice modern place we are in, and that's changing a little bit by the end of this year. You may have heard about .NET 5. Some of these are Microsoft slides, obviously. So what they're doing is they're taking the best of Mono, they're taking the best of .NET Core, and combining them into one runtime. So the user or the developer doesn't care as much as to which .NET do I pick. You essentially pick the type of app you're building, and you get the correct runtime. So this is what's coming. And again, it's just going to be a unification effort. It's a big effort on Microsoft's part. But for us, again, the story just gets better because we can target more frameworks and more solutions. So the standardization of the tools and the frameworks is important. So let's talk about Xamarin for a few minutes. Xamarin makes it really easy for .NET devs to build truly native cross-platform apps. And I'll show you some stuff in Visual Studio. It's very welcome in Visual Studio, be it on Windows or Mac. It's the same experience. So you're using .NET to build iOS, Android, and other platforms. So the whole point is you're going to share some C# code, and then you build these iOS, Android, and Windows heads separately. And this was where they started. This was called Xamarin iOS or Xamarin Android. And then things evolved into what's called Xamarin Forms about 4 or 5 years back. And this is where you started writing a shared UI code, which is a difficult task because these are 3 very different platforms. But we are writing XAML as our markup to describe the visual tree, and then the rest of the shared C# logic just flows. And at runtime, like these little bits get converted into native iOS and native Android and native Tizen or whatever it's platform that you're running on into that native UI. So it is native UI, native performance, native access to all of the APIs on every device. So it's a good place to be. And this is kind of what is evolving a little bit at the end of the year as well. We also have what's called Xamarin Essentials. This is essentially one NuGet package that lets you access all of the APIs that you have on your mobile device. This is a sample list. I think there's like 30 or so APIs now. So there's nothing on your phone that you cannot access from a Xamarin app, and that's a good story. Like I said, it's truly native. You're building .app or .apk packages. I mean, you don't even have to do just-in-time compilation. Everything can be pre-compiled. So the framework and the platform does not get in the way of your performance. But I mean, we are devs, so we can shoot ourselves in the foot, right? But things are easy. Things are welcoming. Everything is open source. There is no cost. Visual Studio is free. Community edition onwards, all of the tools are free. There are some cloud services in the Xamarin stack that you still pay for, but that's a good place to be because that's really for enterprises to test out their stuff. But otherwise, everything is free. So a few changes that are coming. These are some of the outliers, but Xamarin is open source. Xamarin Forms is open source, which means the community can step in and write what's called renderers. So in between the shared UI code and these platforms are little pieces of code called renderers. So when I write a button or a drop-down or a list, it takes that XAML and translates that into native UI on iOS, Android, and other platforms. So that's the magic, and the community has stepped up to write renderers for other things. So you can have Xamarin Forms now running on Mac, on Linux GTK, on Tizen, and in a way, the web as well. You can run it on WPF. So again, your code just goes to a lot of places, and you just have more opportunities for code sharing between your desktop and your mobile and your web apps. A few more things. This is, I think, maybe they just stopped calling it this, but Apple really wants you to have iOS apps running on the Mac desktop. So starting, I think, late this year or early next year, you should see more and more iOS apps. They already have some of the default ones working on a Mac. So it just gives your Xamarin Forms applications, which run on iOS, just a much bigger market to run on. Because, just like Windows, the Mac desktop store is not doing all that well. It's just a very niche thing to do. So this is coming. We also see dual screen devices. Microsoft just came out with the Surface Duo, which is an Android device, and they're going to come out with the Surface Neo, which I think runs Windows 10X. So this introduces like newer UX paradigms that we have to be aware. But otherwise, I mean, you can do UWP, you can do Xamarin Forms. It's all welcome. So the .NET stack really does go to a few places. And this is evolving a little bit. You're going to hear a lot more about this by the end of this year and then going into next year. So Xamarin is a good place to be, but folks who have done this for a while and enterprises who invest in it sometimes complain about the tools not being as mature as they want, and they want more confidence. They want Xamarin to be a part of .NET, and that's what's happening. So the next evolution of Xamarin Forms is .NET Maui. And it's a funny play on words, and they got some nice URLs going, but and they got the Hawaiian guy coming out. So this is just a unification effort. What is called Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android just will become .NET for iOS and .NET for Android. And the cross-platform story, which right now is Xamarin Forms, that evolves to support Mac, Windows, iOS, Android, and other things like Tizen, like WebAssembly, like Android Wear, or tvOS. It just supports everything. And it's just a more mature platform with more options as to how you define the UI stack. Because right now for Xamarin Forms, everybody just does XAML and C#, and that may be okay for old people like me who have done like lots of WPF or UWP or desktop stuff. But it's a barrier to entry, and not everybody wants to do XAML. So that should be okay. We should be able to welcome everybody else. If you don't want to do web, bring it on. Newer design patterns, you should bring them on into Maui. So that's the goal. On the .NET stack, though, it's not just Xamarin. There are more things going on. It's obviously UWP, which is Universal Windows Platform. This is a runtime that works on every Windows device, starting from, well, we should not say mobile anymore because Windows Phone has been dead like many times over. I'm talking about like any small form factor like tablets, and then it runs on Xbox, runs on HoloLens, runs on Surface Hub, IoT. It's all great. One of the issues with this was it's very much tied to the Windows 10 OS, and they're tied to the Windows update. So they wanted to detach that. So they have actually done that, and it's still in beta, but it's going to come out by the end of this year. It's called WinUI, and it essentially is an end-to-end XAML stack that's separated from Windows. But again, it runs on every Windows device. So that's a good place to be. And then there are a few more choices. There's Uno Platform. These are some really smart guys out of Montreal and Canada, which is actually across the lake from where I am. And what they have done is the Xamarin Forms XAML is a little different flavor of XAML. If you've done any WPF or if you've done any UWP, it looks a little different, and folks don't like it. So if you wanted to stick to Windows XAML, quote unquote, the pure XAML, then you can do Uno Platform. Same idea. They actually use Xamarin and Mono under the covers, and they give you renderers that take you to iOS and Android, and WebAssembly, which we'll talk about, which I would argue that they have one of the best implementations right now of WebAssembly. And in fact, they just did a conference last month, or last week rather, and they are now working on Ubuntu Linux as well. So again, mobile apps, mobile code just goes to so many places, which is great. And I'm old, so I did Silverlight back in the days, and you may still have fond memories or really rough memories of how that ended. Silverlight is actually coming to end of support in October of next year. So this is the time to think about if you still maintain Silverlight apps on like what's the way forward. And WebAssembly can absolutely be the way forward. This is a common web standard that makes your higher level languages compiled down to almost an assembly-like instruction format that your browser can execute. The browser engine can execute at runtime. So it's just as fast as JavaScript. And you open up opportunities for higher level languages to be compiled down, like C# and F# and Rust. Those can all come down and run as WebAssembly. So you may hear a lot about Blazor, and that's exciting. And that's for the web, but it has implications for mobile and like how you build stuff in Visual Studio. Blazor is a new framework from Microsoft that does ASP.NET, but in a new way, and it uses WebAssembly so you can run things C# front and back. And by that I mean you could do a server-side Blazor where your application is running essentially server-side, but you can also do client-side Blazor where it's truly running on WebAssembly and it's compiled down into WebAssembly. So it's just like a SPA application, except you don't have to write JavaScript, you just write C#. So what's happening is you can use Blazor to actually write Xamarin applications today. You can use Blazor to write PWAs, which is progressive web apps. You can use Blazor to write Electron apps that run on desktop. So it really opens up quite a few opportunities on how you can write Blazor and C# and reach the web, reach the mobile, reach the desktop, right? So all good things to keep in mind. It gives you more options to consider as you are building your mobile apps. Any questions from the chat room before I switch to JavaScript? No, are we good? Okay. This is where I miss having people in front and just the interactions that in-person things bring. But yeah, what can we say? It's that kind of year. So let's talk about JavaScript. If you are somebody who's comfortable writing JavaScript, if you're a .NET developer and you're okay with writing SPA applications, then this should all be for you. So progressive web apps is something that Google started pushing, and everybody is welcoming of it. Microsoft is pushing it big time. Apple is kind of grudgingly on board as well. So this is okay. but it comes with the caveat that you are not hosting your apps in the App Store. So you are using it as a mobile web application. So it's just a website essentially, but it behaves very, very nicely on your mobile form factor. You can rely on it to work offline. You can rely on it to load up fast, and you can rely on it to give you notifications. So it doesn't do everything, and it depends a little bit on the browser that you're running on. So Chrome and like Chromium or Edge, you are really fine, but like Safari does not have as many features. So in terms of your device APIs, you're not going to get everything compared to like a native app or even a cross-compiled app. But if that's not your biggest priority, then this is a really good story, because for many web applications, this is an easy way to get to the mobile form factors and be able to be a good citizen. So lots of help in this space as well. Essentially, if you have a website today, there is help to translate that into a PWA. And not every website should be one, but if you have a workflow that does support mobile in a lightweight fashion, then this is very good. Microsoft in the community builds a thing called Pwa Builder, which essentially what you're doing is you're looking at your website and you're putting in some metadata. You're putting in some extra files that show you that tells the browser that I am somebody special. I need some things. I need access to some things like your offline storage. I need access to the camera. I need this and that. And you declare, and the user can pin your app to the home screen, and then it's just almost like an app. It just runs inside of a web shell. There's a Lighthouse that Chrome folks make. So there's a lot of help if you want to build a PWA. This is Pwa Builder. By the way, folks, don't worry about the slides. I can get you a link to all of the stuff that I am showing here. It's just the conversations that we have that are more important here. So this is Pwa Builder. If you want to take a look at this, just do a search, and essentially it takes your existing website. It helps you create a metadata file, and then you are off and go. So essentially, you're creating services that run in the background that can fetch data, that can do push notifications. So it's a good story. I talked about Cordova. So if you're maintaining stuff like this, again, just like what we see with every technology, just because you have end of support does not mean that things are dying today or things are going up in flames. But if you have a new greenfield application you're building today, you probably should not be looking at Cordova, because Apache did say that they're going to stop support for that. But again, simple line of business apps, this is still a good story. Ionic is a good framework that gives you a lot of tools to build for hybrid apps. And they also build tools that work for PWAs. So definitely give them a shot. This is something I care about quite a bit, and it's all open source. So there's this thing called NativeScript, which started probably 4 or 5 years back, and it's an open source framework that lets you write JavaScript or TypeScript with Angular, with Vue, and even with React. So you can write truly native cross-platform apps, and it lets you code share between your web stuff and your mobile stuff. Okay, I'm going to read a comment here. Wayne, what if you need to run app offline due to connection issues, mobile inspections by regulatory agencies or within buildings? Yeah, connectivity is not given, absolutely. Think building permit going into building with no cell, data needs to be offloaded. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Wayne. So when we are building for mobile form factors, we just cannot take connectivity for granted. Like you said, like buildings or federal buildings, or I mean, you might have networks blocked, you might be in a plane, you might be in a tunnel, who knows? So we must, as developers, we always must check our APIs to make sure we have connectivity before we make service calls that depend on it. And we must store the data that we need for our application. Not every feature needs to be working, because nobody is expecting that unless it's a game, unless you have all the things to need that you need to function offline. But most of it should, if it makes sense. I mean, no one's expecting that you're going to make a service call and bring down fresh data while you don't have connectivity, but the app should be functional, and that's what we're looking for. And everything like Xamarin lets you do that, NativeScript lets you do that, PWAs lets you do that. Every app or every framework will give you APIs to check before you take action. So yeah, so that's my pitch on NativeScript. There's obviously React Native. Again, especially if you're building React web applications, then this makes a lot of sense. This lets you code share. I'm not a big React developer, I can't tell you a whole lot about it. I can only mention, and I can say that if you're doing React, this makes a lot of sense because you get the code share between web and mobile. Microsoft, turns out, makes a lot of apps with React. So if you're using iOS or Android today, most of the apps that you see from Microsoft, many of them are actually written in React Native. So this is trusted technology. You can safely invest in this. You may have also heard about Flutter. This is from Google, and this is kind of taking an exception to Java and how we write Android apps today. This is letting you write things in Dart. So this may be just a small roadblock, but again, it's a language. It's not hard to pick up, and you can write iOS and Android native apps. They use a lot of what's called Skia Sharp. So it's a painting library that paints pixels for you, and it'll do material design. It'll do other design themes, and it works on mobile, works on web, desktop. I don't know. But clearly they're trying to target the Electron thing. But it's here. It's Google's UI toolkit. If you're open to Dart, then get into it. It's fast. It's the runtime is very fast, and the dev cycle, as you will see, like with Xamarin, like with NativeScript, like with React Native, everyone's concerned about the dev cycle in Visual Studio. Like, how long does it take for you to change a piece of code, hit F5, and just see your stuff working? And that's what everyone's trying to improve. Okay, so we are right around half an hour. I want to spend maybe another 10 minutes talking through some stuff, because these are relevant for all mobile devs, if you're using Visual Studio mostly, but also some of the tools that I want to mention, and then I want to show you some code and maybe some fun demos. So let's talk about deployment. You've chosen a framework, you've chosen a stack, and you want to start building up your app, but how do you test your app? And this is where we often hit a roadblock, because we're not sure which way should we go. Should we test on our devices first? Should we start with simulators? And my bet is always start small, start with the simulators. You do not want to release an app out in the public stores without actually testing on device. There's just like too many variations. But to just start building your app, the simulators and emulators have come a long way. So let's start there, and then when needed, you can go to the devices. So let's talk about iOS. This is not an easy story, because again, Apple being Apple, they really like to have, okay, so here's the thing that nobody can get you around. You need to, if you're building for iOS, you need to build an app package that is built in Xcode, that is licensed to the same developer that has the Apple Store account. And that's a regulation. So you do need Xcode to build this stuff. There are some hacks that get you around it. But essentially, if you're building for iOS, be it through Xamarin, be it through NativeScript, be it through React Native, you are using Xcode to go build a native app package, right? So there are lots of simulators that help you out for iPhones and iPads, you name it. Even on Windows, you actually do not have to look at Xcode or Mac side at all. You can simply hit F5 and do a one-time handshaking between windows. It just needs to find a host Mac. That could be somewhere in your network. That could be somewhere in the cloud. But it just needs to go talk to Xcode and do the build and then come back. That's all it means. And this is the Windows iOS simulator. This is essentially a little shell that streams what's coming out from the iOS simulator. So you don't have to look at the Mac. You can just do your builds right inside of Visual Studio. And Macs will not have touch support. Don't quote me on it, but Windows do. So you can actually pinch and zoom around and use your app like your users will use it. So this is nice. Android, it's just a difficult story. There are just so many versions of Android and from the different manufacturers, and they all put their own shell on it, and everything comes in a virtual hard drive, so eventually it takes up space on your computer. But again, get the Android SDKs and simulators that you need. I used to use a lot of Genymotion. That's fast. And even the Android simulator has come a long way. I think I have a slide, or maybe I don't. No, I do. So this one is the Android emulator. This one runs on Hyper-V now on Windows. So in earlier days, like if you did like Docker or any other like Windows or mixed reality development, you could not run your Android emulator side by side because it did not run on Hyper-V, but now it does. So it's a little faster. It works. Now let's talk about this whole concept of like dev loop and trying to make it faster. So we all want things to just be edited and then seeing the results of what we do right away. This is fairly easy for the tools that do web stuff, right? So if you're doing NativeScript, if you're doing React Native, if you're doing Angular, what they can do is just pick up, what's the packaging thing? It's called, oh boy, I'm drawing a blank. The packaging tool in JavaScript that we use to push out stuff, just components that have changed. So for them, it's very easy, but for .NET and Xamarin, this was not easy. But I mean, they have fought through this, and stuff works. This is called hot reloads. Essentially, you edit some XAML and you see the changes right away in the emulator or in the simulator. This is the story with NativeScript. Same with React Native. Like, you do not have to reload the whole app. You just change a line of code and it shows up right away. Well, Webpack. Webpack is what I was forgetting. So all of the web stuff really uses Webpack to only look at the one component that you changed or touched and just push that out to the simulator, not the whole app. So that's what makes the web stuff faster. Let's talk about cloud. And the only reason is you don't want to make an app that's sitting in a silo. You will have like users who move around between devices, and you want that continuity of experience. And some things are just easier with the cloud, with the public cloud. You can do a hybrid thing, absolutely. I talk about Azure because it's a huge infrastructure, does everything under the sun. But if you think about like the content delivery nodes, like if you are serving up users in Asia or Australia, you don't want to serve up from a server that's here, right, in the US, because there's just network lag. So you want to be close to your users. If you want to have authentication and people signing onto your app with your social feeds, you want that kind of stuff to be on the cloud, so you're not rediscovering the wheel. This is one thing I always mention and I use quite a bit. It's Azure Cognitive Services. It's a great way to use some AI, some personalization in your app. So the app is a little more smarter in understanding vision, understanding speech, and conversations. This is all ways in which we can draw our audience back into our app so they keep using it. So I'm a big fan of it. It's all RESTful endpoints. You don't have to know the AI or the math behind it. Things just work. If you're using AWS, obviously they have similar offerings, similar services. It's all in Lambdas, and, cloud functions, serverless functions, and you can test and you can measure. It's all there. There's also Kinvey as backend as a service. Again, same idea, works everywhere. Very thin backend as a service, works for every mobile platform. You can actually host this on Azure and AWS. For mobile apps, be it inside of Visual Studio, or if you just want to do it from like a standalone web thing, DevOps is actually a little important because it's not just fire and forget in a mobile app. You do have to keep an eye on it. How is it doing? How can you test out, excuse me, how can you test out new features before you push them out? How can you do builds? How can you distribute not to the public stores, the app stores? How can you push it out only within your enterprise? And how do you monitor stuff? So for all of that, you have a few solutions, but my favorite solution is VS App Center. It really does a lot of things. It helps you do builds. If you don't have an iOS device or an Apple device and you're building for iOS, it will do the cloud builds for you. It will have a CI/CD pipeline, and you can distribute within an enterprise. You can monitor how things are doing. So it's got a freemium layer that is very lenient, and then once you have to pay Microsoft, it's a good problem to have. And it really works for every type of mobile device that you can think of. So that's my 2 cents. They have a test cloud, so they can test your device on, this used to be the old Xamarin test cloud, but it's now included inside of App Center. So you can deploy your app to like thousands of Android devices, and they'll give you screenshots and crash reports if things are going bad, and obviously analytics on how your app is doing. Okay. I am a little over 2 p.m., so I got to get to showing you some stuff. But last few things, network, we should never be in doubt as mobile developers as to what's happening when we make service calls. Like Wayne was talking about lacking of connectivity. So when you do have connectivity, when you do make service calls, you may be wanting to know what's happening. So many of you may have already used Fiddler or heard about it. This used to be a free web debugging proxy, but the UI was kind of stuck in the 90s. So this is actually our product. But it's free, so I don't mind talking about this a little bit. We have redone this if you have not looked at this recently. So now it's called Fiddler Everywhere, and it's essentially a shell. The old Fiddler used to be a MEF, WPF application. We have separated the UI from the function, and the engine is now Fiddler Core, which you can actually embed in your own applications. And then Fiddler Everywhere runs on Mac, runs on Linux. So go give it a spin. It just came out of beta, so it's a gorgeous polished UI. So take a look at that. Postman, obviously, I use Postman quite a bit as well. This is from Google, lets you test out APIs and get past authentication and other things. So very, very cool tools. I also use Reflector quite a bit. I might actually use that today. So if you have to show your app running on a mobile device to your customers or in a conference or in front of a big screen, that's how you do it. Wirelessly, you can mirror your screen and it just works. So that's all I had to talk about the mobile story. I do mention a few things that we can help. And obviously, you want to get any tools that can help you. It's always the right tools for the right job. There are others who make UI like we do, but I mean, we make TaleLearnCode, which is all things .NET for web, desktop, and mobile. For mobile in particular, there is UI for Xamarin, which is all of the tools that Xamarin developers need to make polished applications, things you don't have out of the box. The charts, the grids, the graphs, you know the story, the calendars. And again, we're not the only ones who make it, but please don't reinvent the wheel. Look around and pick up the tools that work for you. We also, this one's actually free. We make a suite for UWP, which works on every Windows device. We also make a suite for Blazor. If you're building PWAs or if you're looking to build Xamarin applications through Blazor, you can still do that. And Blazor components are great. They run fully client-side or fully server-side, and they're brand new, created fresh out of the box, or like from scratch. It's not a wrapper over JavaScript, so this is all great. And we make a bunch of web stuff as well. You may have heard of Kendo UI, but you can use Kendo UI with Angular, with Vue, and with React. So pick up the framework that works for you, and we are happy to help you render the right UI. It works with PWAs, obviously, so it's a good story. So I got 20 minutes or so to show you some demos, if you're up for it. Any questions before I start? Anyone? I can't see you, so you might as well be asleep. I'm trying to stay awake. It's like I wake up super early. We have a 4.5-year-old, and somewhere in the afternoon, like mid-afternoon, I hit a wall. So I have to take like a 5-minute nap, 10-minute nap. My wife is jealous that I can take like such short naps, but it kind of refreshes me a little bit, and then I can go late into the night. Okay, so let's look at demos, shall we? Okay, what can we show? Let's do Xamarin first, and then we'll look at the web stuff. Or maybe we can do the web stuff first, and then I can show Xamarin. Either way, it doesn't matter. Let's see, what can I show you? Let me do this thing. Oh, and by the way, folks, if you're doing Xamarin, and if you want to know like what's happening, you want a little more deep dive into like .Dotnet Maui that I talked about. Multiphasal sleep pattern. Yes, Don. Yeah. I have been a remote employee for like 10+ years now, but this is different. This is very different. Having kids at home, many of us may have like elders that we care for. This whole thing is very different and challenging for everybody. And I think most employers are trying to be sensitive, but boy, it's difficult. But anyways, this is just a standard Xamarin project. Let me see what I wanted to show. Oh, okay. So if I zoom in here a little bit, whoa, it went too big on me. But this one here is a Xamarin project. This one is a .NET standard library, which is just file new project. It drops a shared project. And then we build platform-specific things. And what I'm trying to show you is just the flexibility of modern Xamarin stack, that it just runs everywhere. So let's start with iOS first. This one, what I'm doing here is I have a Poco object here. Let me make this a little bigger so you can read. So this is just a Poco object. I think I might still have the bookmark for, no, let me pull up my browser, new window. So this is the API that I'm going towards. It's just a sample placeholder thing called JSON placeholder. I like it because it gives you like a RESTful endpoint to just test your stuff with. This one is just looking at posts, and when you do that, it's actually in Latin. It returns a bunch of posts, and every post has like a user ID. It has a title, it has a body, so it gives you stuff to play around with. So that's my RESTful endpoint. I think it gives you like 100 posts at a time. So this is my posts body, and then I have a little couple of pieces of C# code that use an HTTP client, and it goes to that endpoint, which is defined right here as constant, right? So I go to that endpoint and I say, get me all this stuff, right? So when it brings it down, I cast it into I deserialize it. It comes back as JSON into an observable collection, which is a special like C# generic class that XAML developers are very fond of. And it just does two-way data binding. So I can render this easily, bind it to a UI, and then as the object updates, the UI updates. I don't have to do anything, right? So that's what I'm doing. And then in the UI, it's just some XAML here. This one here has a stack layout. It has a search bar, so I can filter things a little bit from the posts that are coming back. And then I have a list view. It's just a simple list view with some template. This, if you have not done any XAML, this will look a little foreign and a little verbose, and that's okay. But if you have done XAML, any type of XAML, this will feel right at home. Maybe things are named a little differently in Xamarin compared to like WPF or UWP, but it's XAML. It's XAML. You can get used to it. So that's it. And when I open up that page, essentially, I'm going to set the item source of that list view to what's coming back from the source. So if I run this real quick, we'll see how this shows up. And this is going to run on iOS because that's my default. I don't have an Android project here, but it's the same idea. Same app, just runs everywhere. So that is my iOS simulator. And what I'm trying to show you is just, this is all Visual Studio. It doesn't matter where you are on Windows or Mac. It just works the same way. And the tools are really good. So just a list of things, really bad UI, but you get the point. This is kind of like hello world of a mobile app. You have a search box that you can filter on. So that's not my point. My point is to show you like how flexible something like Xamarin Forms can be. So if I now switch to Mac, so it doesn't always need to be just mobile, right? So the same app can run more places. So if you look at the Mac project here, this one doesn't have much else. There's nothing Mac specific about this in this project, with the exception of this like app delegate file, in which what we're doing is we're creating up a new window. This is actually an app kit window. So this has got absolutely like it's a Cocoa pod application, but we are creating a window, giving it an X and Y and where to start, giving it a name. And then we are doing forms.init, which is essentially nearing up Xamarin Forms. And we're saying, don't do your storyboards, just let Xamarin Forms do the painting. So if I run this, and if it does run, you shall see that the same UI that we just did for iOS shows up here on a Mac, right? So this is now a desktop application, right? So pure Xamarin Forms, XAML powering a Mac desktop application, which I think is nice. Now let me show you the same app on a different story. Let me close this. And this is where I have to be a little careful. I don't know if my computer, like I'm sharing the screen, but hopefully the CPU doesn't slow down too much. No, not that what I wanted. My beloved Parallels desktop. Let's see if the screen sharing holds up to this. I stream quite a bit. So when I stream, I don't let this computer do all of the heavy lifting. I do actually project this out and I share the desktop on a Windows streaming PC. But right now I'm on a single Mac. So we shall see how this holds up. It's loading. It's trying. I don't know if anybody else here runs Windows on a VM like I do. It works. Just the fans just stay on all day if I'm doing this. But I mean, it's doing quite a bit. I give Windows like half the memory. So it might actually be slower than normal because it is sharing the exact screen that you're looking at. While it's coming up, folks, any questions? Yeah, this may be too slow to show off. Yeah, it's coming along. It's limping along. So I might keep the Windows part really short. So let me skip one demo because you kind of know where I'm going with this. In that last project that I showed you, I can take the same exact project and I can add a WPF head. And without doing any other work, my Xamarin Forms runs inside of a shell in WPF. So you have a desktop Windows app, you have a desktop Mac application, which is nice. But to keep my Windows side of the thing short, let me show you one demo and see if it holds up. this is VS 2019 on a Windows. It runs much faster than this normally, but it is struggling to keep the CPU and the screen share up. Okay, why don't we load up this project, and then we'll switch gears and talk about something else if this is taking a while. No, it's actually trying. Okay, so this one that I'm showing you is actually, while it's coming up, let me show you what this is. This is Uno platform, and this is all Visual Studio, all Windows or all Mac, doesn't matter how you use it. So this one is actually a solution that takes Windows XAML and makes it multi-platform with C# and WinUI, which is the Windows stack. Runs on every browser, runs on app like Apple, runs on Android, runs on Ubuntu, runs on Mac, and runs on WebAssembly. So like if you've done any similar like me back in the days, this is XAML back on the web, but just done a little better. We are not using plugins. So yeah, works with every IDE, works with VS Code as well. It's a good place, and try out this one here. It's a WebAssembly. It's a little playground that they have, so you can load this up, and it's essentially XAML in the browser, and it's nice. So let's see. This guy is still loading. Okay, so yeah, try this this one out if you want. It's a nice way of taking Windows UI and making it cross-platform into Android and iOS and Mac and other things. So Xamarin Forms doesn't need to be your only thing. Oh, this came up. Yay. Okay. I'm going to just cross my fingers and hit run and see how long it takes to run. It is restoring packages and still, well, it started the build and it's running. Yay. I'm on a 4-year-old MacBook Pro, so it's showing its age. Like I have like 2 ports on the left that fail consistently, and the battery is not good. But it still holds up. MacBooks are good, like workhorses. Okay, looks like it's going to work. Maybe it's trying its best. Okay, so this is Edge. So this was a XAML project. This was Uno platform, but it's loading it up on a web browser because the project that I chose. No, where is it? What it's doing here is, oh, it's completely in running mode. So we'll give it a second. It is really slow and chugging. Just to show a hello world. Okay, there you have it, hello world. So yeah, I can show you a playground that has much more complex things. But essentially what I'm trying to show you is this is all C# and XAML. Okay, go ahead and stop. So this one here has, let's see if we can zoom in. Okay, so this one here has iOS. This one here has like Android, Mac, and then it has Universal Windows Platform, and it has WASM. This WASM head is really for the web, and this is what takes your XAML and C# and just puts it out on the web as an application that runs natively on the web using WebAssembly. So if you are invested in XAML and C#, you are in a good place because your code just goes to a lot of places. I can show you demos with the Samsung Gear watches through Tizen. Tizen runs your refrigerators, your TVs. So XAML and C#, if that's what you want to do inside of Visual Studio, you're in a good place. There's just a lot of things it runs on. Yes, please stop debugging so I can turn off Windows. I don't know why I care to just show you like one quick demo, but it's nice. It's like I can work on Windows, I can work on Mac, it doesn't matter anymore. It's the same Visual Studio, and I can run it. In fact, I can that Xamarin Forms project I was showing you, it's the same project. I can just add the WPF head to it, and it just works. I can add a GTK Linux head to it, and it just works on Linux. It's a nice story. So Windows, I'm waiting on you to shut down and not eat up any more of my resources. Then I can switch to the web. Go away, and done, and done. Good. Okay, let me show you the web side of the story real quick, because we talked a little bit about JavaScript. So this is NativeScript, and the point is, be it React Native or be it NativeScript, it's essentially the same things that you're doing. Almost all of these frameworks will give you what's called CLI. It's a command line tool. And then you can start it up locally, and then you can use VS Code. You can even use like Visual Studio, because what you're writing is pretty standard stuff. It's JavaScript, and it's CSS, and it's HTML. So, well, I mean, sort of like HTML. So any IDE really should be fine with this kind of stuff. So, and again, all of this is open source. So what I'm trying to show you is if you wanted to try this out, so there is a place called the Playground that you go to, and this lets you just, like it says, it's playground, so you can play around with this. So this one gives you sort of an IDE that's web-based. You obviously don't want to build your whole app in your browser, but it gives you a starting point. So notice how here, if I can zoom in, like I can make this an Angular application. I can make this TypeScript or JavaScript or Vue, React Native, Svelte. I don't know anything about Svelte, but those of you who are smart enough can do that. Let me just pick JavaScript, and you'll see what it does. It essentially creates this particular application that has some global, like app level CSS, app level JavaScript, and then it has components. This is just like Angular. This is just like any other SPA. So it has each component is made up of some XML, which kind of looks like XAML, kind of looks like HTML, somewhere in between. And then it has JavaScript that controls like the business logic of what it does. And then it has a view model if you wanted to have that separation. So Mvvm design pattern, which is very popular with like XAML devs. The same thing can be just lifted and shifted to make it work on this one here. So this is the app, and it does nothing but just like put out a few pieces of text. And let me try showing you this and what this does exactly. So I'm going to pull up Reflector if I can. No, not Postman. Come on. I have my microphone sitting right here, so I'm looking over that. All right, Postman, go away. No, 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 I don't want you right now. I want your Reflector. Quit. Okay, so with that guy up, see, I can now pick up my phone, and you can see this in just a second. I can screen mirror, and it finds my MacBook, and it gives me a code. Yeah. Okay, here we go. So that's my phone, right? That you're just seeing here. So if I can make this a little smaller, no, the browser. If I can make this one a little small, then you can see the phone on the side. There you go. So in here, what I can do is I can hit preview. Then it gives me a QR code. So now I can go on my phone. No, these by the way, are coloring pages for my kid, because we have to keep the kids busy, right? So every day I'm printing out coloring pages. Somebody was joking, like, why do you still have a printer? I'm like, I have a printer because I have to print out coloring pages so the kid can be engaged for like 15 minutes. So anyways, you can see what I'm searching for. But I can come down here and I can pull up this thing called the Playground app. And then I can scan the QR code, and I'm literally scanning the QR code that you see on screen. And now you have it, right? So that's the app that you just saw on the web, but you have it built here. And I think, see now it says like Sam's iPhone, so it's connected. If I take out things here, if I just change some code, and if I hit Command S, you see how quickly like this went away, like that exclamation mark. So this is live sync. This is the same story with Xamarin, with Hot Reload. This is the same story with React Native. The tools, the dev loops are really, really good now. So that's a good place to be. All right, so I'm going to close this one out because there is nothing else on my phone that I need to show you. But what I'm trying to say is you can start here on the Playground, and be it an Angular app, be it a Vue, be it whatever you want, and then you just hit download, right? And then it tells you a bunch of things. It downloaded a zip file for me, but it's telling you that, hey, if you need to run this on your phone, that's fine, but it's kind of a shell. It's not really an exact thing. It's a native app that you are running, but we are essentially hosting it inside of a web shell, which is not the exact representation of what it is. So if you have to run this really local, then grab the CLI tools, and then you can do npm install to grab a CLI tool, and then you can do TNS preview, which previews the app in your simulator. But if you just wanted to keep doing the QR code and run it inside of a shell, you can do that all day. So what it downloaded was just a zip file. So let me go to that. I think it was called NS Playground. So if I get this NS Playground thingy, and oh, don't slow down on me. Okay, so if I pull up VS Code now, you'll see the exact same application open and downloads and NS Playground. I'm just going to open up here. So you will see the exact same app that we started on the web now local, right? So here's my homepage JavaScript, here's my XML, here's my view model, here's my app-wide CSS. And from this point onwards, it's just Visual Studio Code, which is very, very good at helping you write JavaScript, helping you write CSS to style things. And then I think there's an extension, there's a native script extension. So I think what it does, it lets you write, like run things on iOS or Android right from inside of Visual Studio. There's like a command palette support, so you can do build and run all in the same step, and you can change your code. You can see things running in the simulator right away. So really, really good story. And this is the same. I think Flutter has the same thing. And again, you can do all of this inside of Visual Studio. I think Flutter also has CLI tools. If I do start, so select the operating system you're going to use, Mac, because that's where I'm at. So get the Flutter SDK, and then git clones, export, and Flutter, and then read the docs, update your path. Looks like you do, well, of course you have to have Xcode, and then open simulator. Okay, so Flutter create app. So it's the same as native script saying create app, and then go into the Flutter, and then you say Flutter run, right? And then behind the scenes, it's all VS Code, right? So what I'm trying to say is that the tools are really, really polished. Visual Studio will help you out in just about everything that you do. And it's your choice. Look at what else you're doing. Let me go back to where we were, and I think we stopped here. So look into what I'm trying to say is look into what else you're doing, right? Because unless you're working like nights and weekends as an indie dev and you're just wanting to push out apps to the store, unless you're working in like a startup that's focused on just mobile, more than likely you are doing other things, right? You have desktop applications that's running your business. You have web applications that's running your business. So you don't have to do mobile in a silo. Look into what else you're doing, what else are your developers doing, and then bring them on board with whatever stack that you're choosing and stick to it, because it's a rich ecosystem no matter how you pick it. And Visual Studio will help you out. Tools like command line tools will help you out. Windows or Mac, it doesn't really matter. So it's a good place to be. I think mobile is hard because it's just the nature of the business. It's just difficult to have such quick iterations and maintain apps over time. It takes a lot of effort, but it's a good place to be in terms of tooling, and just a lot of choice for devs, and I enjoy that. So to close things out, I got one more, like less than a minute left. So this is again one of the Microsoft slides, and it's true, and you've heard so many folks talk about this throughout this pandemic. Software really kind of eats the world in terms of how we drive economies, what we can do to make the life better, the world a better place for everybody. And I think we have a lot of tools, we have a lot of power in our hands to make things better for everyone. So let's do that. And yeah, like I said in the beginning, times are hard. So let's be kind on ourselves. Let's take care of our families. And like they say, like this too shall be past. And we'll have get back to our normalcy soon. So that's it from me. An hour goes by fast. I tried to show you lots of different things. Hopefully I was not jumping around too suddenly, but be it .NET, be it JavaScript, pick your framework, pick your tools. Visual Studio is here to help, and you'll be in a good place no matter what you pick. You have native API access, native apps that you can build with just about every stack. So go have fun. And that's me again on just about everywhere on the internet. So Rebecca and folks, I appreciate you. Hopefully I'm finishing up just a minute late, so that's okay. And thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in for an hour. I hope you have a great rest of your day and enjoy the rest of Code PaLOusa. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Wayne. All right, so I'll hang out. I'm not sure exactly how things, or if there's a common place where speakers are hanging out, but I'm here for the rest of the day. Hey, Tyler, thank you. Thank you for your kind words. Evan, great session. Thank you. Oh, okay. I work with WPF at work and do React web apps on the side, so the content is very useful. Yes, thank you. That's the reality for most enterprises. Link to the slides. Yes, yes, yes. All right, bear with me, folks. You're going to see me do stuff live. If you want access to that, I can get you that real quick. I'm up. OneDrive, where are you? OneDrive. Actually, what I can do is I can make this a PDF real quick. Is there a common place where I can post things, maybe on the stage? This is what I could share this really easy and not have you guys kind of stick around here with me. But I can definitely make this a PDF and share the link to it. Just going to take me a few seconds here. Where's my file? Oh, there is my file. Export. PDF is fine. Let's do it in OneDrive so I can give you an access to it. Export. If it's in the chat, it'll be there when the videos are released later. Yeah, Don, thank you, thank you. As soon as I'm done with this, I can get you a link so you can play with the slides. I think I have it in like SlideShare and other places, but just like the latest bits. This is sitting right here. And now if I go to OneDrive, where is it? Up there. Show up. Where is it? Oh, it's syncing. OneDrive is thinking about it and pushing it off. Almost done. Wow, it's like 67 megabytes on PDF as well. Okay, now it's done. Come on. We can do this quick. There it is. No, don't go away. And that, and I'm going to do a share. You probably don't want to edit mine. So take that away, apply, and copy. And now I can come back here. And there. So that should do it. So, John, thank you. And Rebecca, thank you. I might stop the screen share, but I'm going to be hanging around here and in the speaker lounge if anybody else wants to talk. But thank you all so much, and I'll see you around.